During World War II, American bomber pilots, especially those from the 5th Air Force, became experts at skip bombing Japanese ships in the Pacific. By September 1942, after several aerial attacks against the advancing Imperial Japanese Navy, including the Battle of the Coral Sea in May, and strikes on convoys along the New Guinea coast, General George Kenney realized that hitting moving ships from high altitudes with B-17 Flying Fortress bombers was too difficult. When he took command of General Douglas MacArthur's Air Force on July 29, 1942, he found the force in bad shape after a long struggle to stop the Japanese. Most of the 19th Bomb Group had retreated from the Philippines and was in poor condition. Morale was low, and many of the crews just wanted to go home. Out of 32 B-17s at MIA Airfield at the base of Australia's York Peninsula, only 14 were combat ready. The rest needed repairs, parts, or both. Despite their condition, those 32 planes were all they had. If they wanted to continue fighting, they had to use them. By August 7, 1942, Kenney worked hard to get 16 B-17s ready to attack the heavily defended Japanese base at Rabaul on the northern tip of New Britain Island, at the same time as the Marine Corps attack on Guadalcanal. Rabaul was located at the northern end of Blanche Bay, and its harbor was deep enough for any warship, with a wide entrance and Simpson Harbor shaped like a horseshoe just beneath the town. After capturing Rabaul from the Australians in January 1942, the Japanese turned it into a major base, complete with a deep-water harbor and nearby airfields, Buna, about 9 miles to the south, and Lunai, located southeast of the harbor. When the 19th Bomb Group first hit Buna Airfield on August 7, 1942, they managed to destroy many aircraft and distract the Japanese from the marine assault on the Solomon Islands. Over the next few months, the 19th Bomb Group, the 43rd Bomb Group, and the 5th Air Force carried out repeated attacks on Rabaul and Japanese convoys heading toward New Guinea. However, bombing from high altitude proved ineffective because Japanese ships could easily move out of the bomb's path before they reached water level. Less than 1% of bombs dropped from 25,000 feet hit their moving targets. Something had to change. General Kenney and his aide, Major William Benn, had earlier discussed a possible solution: low-level skip bombing. They considered releasing bombs from about 50 feet so they would bounce across the water like a stone before hitting the side of a ship. The bombs would be fitted with 5-second delay fuses, so they would explode underwater after impact, blowing holes in the hull. Although the British originally developed the concept of skip bombing, they abandoned it, thinking it was too risky. But Kenney and Benn revived the idea and began testing it. At first, they believed only medium bombers like the A-20, B-25, or B-26, each equipped with forward-firing guns, could handle low-altitude runs effectively. These planes could better approach enemy ships and drop bombs at close range. Lieutenant James T. Murphy recalled that after a few test runs, Kenney and Benn realized they needed to practice more. If Japanese ships had strong deck guns, the attacking aircraft would be vulnerable, especially during daylight. Still, General Kenney believed skip bombing could work. He removed Major Benn from his staff and put him in charge of the 63rd Bomb Squadron under the 43rd Bomb Group. Benn was given full control to develop low-altitude and skip bombing tactics against Japanese ships. Both men understood that their best chance to destroy Japanese vessels was to strike them while they were anchored. Even though they preferred using lighter aircraft for skip bombing, only the large 4-engine B-17 bombers had the range to reach Rabaul, so they had no choice but to use them. Major Benn began searching for the right kind of bomb fuses. At first, he used Australian-made 10- and 12-second delay fuses. According to Lieutenant Murphy, the squadron began dropping bombs from 50 feet, but they quickly discovered problems. The bombs sometimes bounced dangerously close to the aircraft, and the fuses were unreliable, with detonation times ranging from milliseconds to 30 seconds. Unable to get suitable fuses in Australia, Ben requested supplies from the U.S. Army. Meanwhile, the crews practiced skip bombing runs using an old ship called the SS Pruth, which was grounded on a reef near Port Moresby, New Guinea. They experimented with different bomb sizes and practiced flying at about 2,000 feet to search for targets. Once they located a ship, the B-17s would drop to about 250 feet and level out, flying at around 220 miles per hour to make their bombing run. The bomb was often dropped by the bombardier from a height of 60 to 100 feet from the side of the ship. If done correctly, the bomb would hit the water's surface, skip into the air, strike the side of the ship, and sink beside it. According to the 43rd Bomb Group historian, the bombs didn't have enough time to point downward from that low altitude. Lieutenant Murphy explained that after releasing the bomb, he would fly directly over the ship, maintaining the same speed and altitude. The bombs, still carrying more forward than downward momentum, would bounce across the waves and strike the side of the freighter. This gave him just enough time to escape, while the bomb, equipped with a 4 to 5 second delayed fuse, sank beside the ship. The underwater explosions often split ships in half and caused instant fires and blasts. General Kenny watched a skip bombing drill near Port Moresby on the morning of September 20th, 1942. Captain Ken McCuller showed great skill, avoiding 6 out of 10 bombs aimed at the proof target. Kenny learned that the air crews had managed to convert Australian 10 to 12-second fuses into 5-second versions, allowing the bombs to explode at just the right moment. He acknowledged that the modified fuses were good enough, even though they sometimes went off in 3 or 7 seconds. Though pleased with the results, Kenny understood skip bombing was not yet ready for combat. He instructed the 63rd Bomb Squadron to continue practicing. The Japanese aircraft from Vunacano and Lakunai airfields protected Rabaul's Simpson Harbor. Major Ben reminded his pilots that their biggest advantage was launching surprise night attacks. In September 1942, the Japanese lacked effective night fighters despite having hundreds of planes stationed in the Rabaul area. They wouldn't develop the Nakajima J-1N-1C twin-engine night fighter, known in the U.S. as Irving, until May 1943. By then, the bottom of Simpson Harbor was already filled with sunken ships. Lieutenant Murphy said they only used skip bombing at night from their first mission to their last. To catch the first light of day, he would approach from the east during sunrise or fly into the rising moon. This allowed him and the bombardier to spot enemy ships before their crews could react. Major Ben ordered his pilots to complete the missions as quickly as possible. Usually, the Japanese ship crews noticed the low-flying American bombers at the last moment, giving them little time to fire back. Murphy said they were often too late, or any damage was minimal. Sometimes the B-17 crew would return for a second run if they hadn't used all their bombs, but they always made sure to leave before daylight. They would fly away without gaining altitude, then increase altitude once at a safe distance to head home. Murphy explained they never stayed long, as they could always expect a swarm of enemy fighters to appear once it was daylight. Japanese transport ships were the primary targets for skip bombing missions. Murphy confirmed this by writing that they searched from different altitudes for top-priority Japanese transports and cargo ships. Major Ben stressed that their goal was to strike the Japanese where it hurt most, especially in their shipping, transports, cargo ships, and their escorts, like warships. During their downtime, the men of the 63rd Bomb Squadron practiced skip bombing on an abandoned freighter near Port Moresby. They also conducted regular bombing runs against Japanese infantry at Buna and Gona in northern New Guinea, and occasionally targeted enemy ships along the New Guinea coastline. Murphy wrote that they practiced skip bombing between missions, even while flying from Australia into New Guinea. Their ability to skip bomb effectively was constantly being put to the test. In October 1943, the U.S. Army finally began supplying American-made fuses to General Kenny's 5th Air Force. On the night of October 22nd, the 63rd Bomb Squadron of the 43rd Bomb Group launched an attack on a buildup of Japanese ships at Rabaul, This marked the first skip bombing mission in American history. 6 B-17s from the 63rd departed Port Moresby at midnight, followed by 6 more from the 64th Bomb Squadron. The 64th bombed Rabaul from 10,000 feet, drawing attention and anti-aircraft fire, while the 63rd used skip bombing to hit the Japanese ships. Captain Franklin T. Greene became the first skip bomber to complete the mission successfully. Before even reaching Simpson Harbor, he skip-bombed a light cruiser and a 5,000-ton cargo ship. Then, he flew into the harbor and attacked a 15,000-ton cargo ship twice, scoring direct hits. Greene saw the cruiser burning and sinking, with both cargo ships also going down within minutes. Captain Carl Husted set a 10,000-ton cargo ship ablaze within the harbor using skip bombing. Captain McCuller, flying in B-17 Blackjack, skipped 2 bombs into the side of a Japanese warship. The 63rd Bomb Squadron had either sunk or damaged at least 5 Japanese ships in just a few minutes. According to the squadron's historian, this was a jackpot night and the first successful use of skip bombing. When General MacArthur heard about the success of the raid, he awarded Major Ben the Distinguished Service Cross and praised his determination in developing the skip bombing technique. Soon after, General Kenny began sending the first crews of the battered 19th Bomb Group back to the United States. Around this time, the 90th Bomb Group was arriving from the U.S., bringing the longer-range B-24 Liberators. Kenny had promised the 19th Bomb Group they'd return home soon, and by the end of October, that promise had been fulfilled. Unfortunately, as soon as the 19th left, an inspection of the 90th Bomb Group's B-24s revealed a major manufacturing flaw. Each plane had a fractured nose gear. This left Kenny relying solely on the 43rd Bomb Group's B-17s and the few Fortresses from the 19th that remained. These aircraft now represented nearly all of the heavy bomber strength he had available. On the evening of October 25th, the 63rd Bomb Squadron took off for another mission to skip-bomb Japanese ships at Simpson Harbor, Rabaul. 8 planes headed out like hungry predators, still fueled by the adrenaline of previous battles. According to the historian of the 43rd Bomb Group, these planes flew with the fierceness of winged tigers. Lieutenant Jack Wilson, piloting B-17F named Fireball Male, managed to sink a 5,000-ton cargo ship. Another vessel was heavily damaged by Captain Husted, and Captain Greene destroyed a jetty near the harbor that kept burning long after the attack, so bright it was still visible 80 miles away when the planes departed. Then on October 30th, General Kenny sent 10 more planes, some from the 43rd Bomb Squadron and others from the 28th, on another mission to keep pressure on Rabaul. The 43rd went in low again, performing skip-bombing runs and claimed hits on 2 destroyers and a large cargo ship. Photos taken the next day confirmed the damage, showing all 3 vessels half-submerged or grounded. General Kenny then received word from South Pacific commanders requesting help attacking Japanese ships at Tonolai Harbor, located at the southern end of Bougainville Island. Despite that, he continued to focus efforts on Rabaul and northern Papua New Guinea. On November 11th, a few B-17s from the 43rd Bomb Group attacked the harbor and observed several enemy ships lined up along both banks. At 1:30 in the morning on November 12th, 4 B-17s from the 63rd Squadron took off to strike Tonolai Harbor. Flying in pairs as part of the buddy system, they split into 2 teams, one to hit the east side and the other the west. Lieutenant Murphy, piloting a B-17F nicknamed Pluto, spotted the glowing trail of a 10,000-ton transport ship. He dropped from 2,000 feet to just 200 feet, lining up his sight as he shouted, "Bomb, bomb, bomb, bomb." His bombardier released the explosives one by one. The anti-aircraft guns opened fire too late. The bombs hit with deadly accuracy, setting the transport ablaze. Explosions rocked the ship, and Murphy's wingman, Captain Barhia, confirmed it had flipped over. Meanwhile, across the harbor, Captain Fulmer Sogard in another B-17 sank a 10,000-ton transport with a bomb to the middle and 2 more along the waterline. Captain Ed Scott scored hits on an 8,000-ton cargo ship, causing serious damage. The following night at 1 a.m., Lieutenant Murphy and Captain Heichel once again launched from Port Moresby, still flying Pluto, to return to Tonolai Harbor. They flew into a violent storm that made the crew fear for their engines, but they pushed through and reached the harbor just as the moon rose. Murphy began another skip bombing run, but before he could release his payload, a shell struck Pluto's No. 4 engine. Despite the hit, Murphy managed to drop 2 1,000-pound bombs into a 10,000-ton cargo ship while feathering the damaged engine's propeller. As they passed over a nearby airstrip, they were hit by more anti-aircraft fire. Murphy dropped the remaining 2 bombs, hitting another ship and setting it ablaze. Moments later, another shell tore a 2-foot hole in the nose of Pluto, sending cold air rushing in and making it feel like a hurricane inside. Despite the damage to the aircraft and partial engine failure, Murphy kept control and guided Pluto back through the storm, landing safely at Port Moresby. Inside the plane, everything had been tossed around the nose and cockpit. The crew had taken a beating, but Murphy expressed deep respect for the B-17's toughness, calling it a flying fortress that truly lived up to its name. For the rest of November, the 5th Air Force focused its efforts on supporting the Allied offensive against the heavily fortified Japanese positions at Buna and Guinea along the northern coast of New Guinea. General George Kenney's air units launched constant assaults anytime Japanese ships were spotted transporting reinforcements or supplies to the 2 strongholds. On the evening of November 24th, 5 Japanese destroyer transports were detected making their way toward Buna. Captain McCuller, flying the B-17 known as Blackjack, dove to just 200 feet and released bombs aimed at the stern of one of the destroyers. While the majority of B-17s from the 63rd and 65th Bomb Squadrons executed low-level bombing runs, 2 ships were damaged, and one, named Hayashio, was sunk. Captain McCuller later described how his bombs landed just off the edge of the target ship, and soon after, anti-aircraft fire hit the tail section of Blackjack. The tail gunner's ammunition exploded, sending about 70 rounds off and igniting a fire inside the aircraft. The crew quickly extinguished the blaze as McCuller circled back for another attack. Flying once again at low altitude, he hit the destroyer and started another fire near the ship's front section. However, Blackjack was struck again by anti-aircraft fire, which injured 2 crew members and damaged the aircraft's No. 1 engine. McCuller climbed to 4,000 feet and passed over the burning enemy vessel one last time, dropping his final set of bombs. They landed harmlessly in the water. While heading back to Port Moresby, another burst of anti-aircraft fire destroyed the No. 3 engine. Despite the critical damage, McCuller successfully flew Blackjack home. Meanwhile, the damaged Japanese convoy limped back to Rabaul without the Hayashio. Captain McCuller continued to lead B-17 missions for the 5th Air Force, focusing heavily on the skip bombing technique against enemy ships. On January 16, 1943, McCuller was promoted to the rank of Major and took command of the 64th Bomb Squadron. He immediately began instructing his crews in the art of skip bombing. According to the squadron's historian, McCuller's flying inspired both officers and enlisted men. His skill in skip bombing made a lasting impression. General Kenney recognized that one of the limitations of the B-17 was its lack of forward-firing guns, which made it harder to inflict damage before bombs were released. Although skip bombing had already proven effective with the B-17, he assigned Colonel Paul Pappy Gunn to modify the lighter and faster B-25 Mitchell medium bombers used by the 3rd Bomb Group. Gunn outfitted the B-25s with 10 forward-firing .50 caliber machine guns along the nose and sides of the fuselage, significantly enhancing their combat ability against ships. In early March 1943, the Japanese launched a major attempt to reinforce their positions in New Guinea by dispatching 8 destroyers, 7 transports, and 1 special service ship to carry the 51st Division. However, hundreds of Allied aircraft were alerted once the convoy was sighted in the Bismarck Sea. On March 2nd, 7 B-17s from the 63rd Bomb Squadron arrived at the scene. Lieutenant Murphy, piloting a B-17 named #41 to 24,381 Panama Hadti, and his wingman Captain Sogard in a plane named the Fightin' Swede, descended to execute skip bombing runs while 5 other planes attacked from higher altitudes. Despite heavy anti-aircraft fire, Murphy pressed on, hitting a transport ship directly in the middle. He later reported that as he circled back around and came in closer, he saw the stern of the ship lifted skyward. It had broken in two and was sinking. Captain Sogard followed with his own run, delivering a 5,000-pound bomb load that left his target dead in the water. Although the high-altitude bombers managed to score some hits, the lower-flying B-17s continued attacking ships throughout the day and into the evening. The next day, on March 3rd, 106 Allied aircraft, including both American and Australian planes, launched a coordinated wave of attacks against the Japanese convoy. The most successful strike came from 12 of Colonel Gunn's B-25 medium bombers, which flew in at low level and used skip bombing techniques to hit 11 different ships. They succeeded in sinking 1 destroyer and 1 transport. The B-17s from the 43rd Bomb Group also scored several hits during their low-altitude runs, resulting in 2 ships sunk and 2 more severely damaged. On March 4th, the B-25s returned to their base in Moresby, and the Allied forces declared victory in the Battle of the Bismarck Sea. The Japanese convoy was nearly obliterated, with all 7 transports, 1 service vessel, and 4 destroyers destroyed. Nearly 3,000 Japanese troops were lost in the attack. The Allies, in contrast, lost only 3 fighter planes, 1 B-17, and 13 airmen. The battle showcased the deadly precision of the B-25s in skip bombing enemy ships in daylight. Although the B-17s played a critical role and were credited with sinking 6 ships, it was clear that the smaller, faster twin-engine bombers had become the superior weapon in these types of missions. Flying low and fast, the B-25s, as well as the Martin B-26 Marauder and the Douglas A-20 Havoc, were harder targets for anti-aircraft guns. These aircraft, equipped with numerous forward-firing machine guns and in some cases cannons, could attack Japanese ships effectively before they even needed to drop their bombs. Their speed and agility gave them a major advantage over the larger and slower B-17s, whose time in the Pacific was drawing to a close. As the war progressed and the Allies adopted the island-hopping strategy to inch closer to Japan, the longer-range B-24 Liberator began to replace the shorter-range B-17S. By the end of 1943, the B-17 was no longer being used in the Pacific theater. Major Ben McCuller, one of the earliest champions of skip bombing, was no longer alive by then. He had disappeared during a reconnaissance mission in a B-25 on January 18, 1943. The aircraft was never found. Even though the B-17 was phased out of the Pacific, it had pioneered skip bombing and proved to the world that this aggressive low-altitude tactic worked. The technique it helped develop was carried forward by the more agile and powerful twin-engine bombers, who continued using it until the end of the war. When Japan finally surrendered on September 2, 1945, the skip bombing legacy remained as one of the defining air tactics of the Pacific conflict. John Eric Saylor, a retired university police officer from Bensonville, Illinois, now teaches social studies to 8th graders. He resides in River Grove, Illinois, and is the author of 4 books, including Blossoming Silk Against the Rising Sun, U.S. and Japanese Paratroopers in the Pacific in World War II,